Welcome back to Open Window Politics. They're going to be doing a new prediction. We're going to go with a new candidate on the Democratic side. We'll be going with Andy Beshear. He is the current governor of Kentucky. Interestingly enough, he's a Democrat, which is why he's going against J.D. Vance in this prediction. But he has been known as definitely a more moderate candidate, and you really have to be to win in a deep red state as a Democrat, such as Kentucky. So I do think that some of these states, this is based on the 2024 presidential elections, and I do think that many of them will end up further in, didn't mean to do that, Pennsylvania will end up further in the Democratic column, and that it will generally be a good election for Democrats. We're going to go with that. And so starting off with this, with none of the swing except we did characterize the swing district there. So that brings us 225 to 219, with Andy Beshear taking the lead at 219, or at 225, sorry. And I do think that, I don't think Kentucky will narrow up enough to be in the likely. It is a reliably Republican state. It went to Trump by ballpark like 30 points. So it would have to narrow up by 15 points with Andy Beshear at the top of the ticket. And I don't see that as a possibility. Maybe if Democrats had like a blowout, amazing election and Andy Beshear was the Democratic nominee, maybe it could get to likely, but I do think in pretty much every circumstance that Kentucky will remain in the safe column. And but regardless of that, so it's we'll be going through the swing states now, and I think that in Nevada it'll be an interesting case. I do think that Vance probably won't do as well here as Trump did in 2024 if Vance is the nominee. So I do think it would probably end up in the Democratic column. So that's going to be 6 electoral college votes for Andy Beshear. And then we get to state of Arizona. Arizona is going to be interesting. I do think that if it were between these two candidates, that it would probably end up in the Republican column. I could definitely see it in the Democratic column. Things are looking pretty good for Democrats right now, especially with the recent 2025 elections. But I do think that if the election were to be held today, that it would go to J.D. Vance in the Republican column. And then we get to these 2 swing states in the Southeast, the other half of the Sun Belt. I do think that it would be a different case for each of these swing states. I do think that North Carolina has fairly consistently voted for the Republicans on the presidential level. They've been known to occasionally elect a Democrat. They're probably most likely going to in 2026. And I do think, but I don't think on the presidential level that they will vote for a Democrat, even if a moderate one like Andy Beshear. But I do think Beshear will have a good shot at taking Georgia, and then we get to these 3 Rust Belt states. I think that, J.D. Vance is obviously was a senator from Ohio, and then Andy Beshear is, of course, the governor from Kentucky. So there is kind of Rust Belt appeal in both of these candidates, and I do think that just by nature of Andy Beshear being a very moderate candidate, he would be viewed as the more moderate option, that it would probably result in a victory of the 3 Rust Belt states. And then I do think in the district here in Nebraska that it would be lean. I could see it in the tilt, but even Harris was able to win this district in Nebraska, the Omaha district. So I do think it is most likely going to end up in the Democratic column. So with that brings us to 292 for Andy Beshear, to 246 for J.D. Vance. Feel free to agree or disagree with me in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.